Well, hey there. You've stumbled upon the intersection of internet quandaries and psychological insight. Welcome to Veritas Views on AITA, where the quirks of the internet meet the expertise of Veritas Psychology Partners.
Thanks for joining us. I'm your host, Michael McBride. I'm joined by our dynamic trio of psychologists today.
Hi, I'm Dr. Gayle MacBride, and I'm here today, of course, with Dan Kessler, my business partner and fellow psychologist, but we are being joined by Dr. David Nathan. I'm so excited because now we finally have someone who works with children and adolescents joining us. He is an expert in ADHD, autism, anger management, anxiety, depression, PTSD, and adoption. I can't wait to hear how all of these specialties come together in our conversation today. David not only is a wonderful psychologist and, quite frankly, a consultation partner, he also, in addition to working for a large regional healthcare system, works in a private practice where he provides assessment and testing for the aforementioned diagnoses. He likes to travel, attend live music, and apparently perform live music. Maybe, I don't know. You play the piano, David. This is
I'm not doing any shows, but during COVID, I took up piano, I really enjoy it. So it's kind of fun seeing how practicing a little bit every day, and sometimes a little bit more than a little bit every day, you can really make improvements over time. So
Cool.
Well, mostly
wonderful.
for friends and family at home, or at someone's house. But I really enjoy it.
Oh, fun. Actually, our good friend plays the music for our podcast, and he is really just kind of one of those at-home players too. He's been trained over the years and played for a long time. But Matthew Reddington does the music for us, and he's just a cool dude.
Oh, very cool.
Yeah. Anyway, Dan, welcome.
Oh, hi.
We've cut you out of this entirely, but you are here. You're uncharacteristically quiet.
I'm giving space for other voices. Giving space for other voices.
Wonderful.
So glad to be here. Really looking forward to what Michael has brought to us today. Michael, you have a quandary.
Yeah, well, welcome all three of you this morning. And for any of the newbies out there, if you don't know what we're talking about or what this podcast is, in short, I've gone out and I found a scenario online where somebody has asked the question, which is, who's the asshole here? And, that's what we're going to hopefully determine, or at least have a thoughtful discussion around. I guess I'll say that. And where there's been any kind of identifiable information, I've tried to make it a little more discreet. And as always, or if you're new, you should know, stick around through the credits. We always have some kind of bonus conversation. But neither Dan nor Gayle nor David know what I'm going to throw their way. So today, this is the topic we got. The headline is, am I the asshole for telling my girlfriend to go back on her ADHD medication?
Ooh.
Ooh.
Okay. There's more.
Wow.
I'm sure.
Is there anything else? Let's just more context here.
Of course.
Context would be good.
Yeah.
And this is one where the people involved in it are adults, but young adults. So they are 20.
Sounds like a young
and
adult
22.
question.
Yeah. 20 and 22. The poster. The poster is male. He's 22 and his girlfriend is 20. So anyway, this is what he says. My girlfriend and I have been dating for 3 years. She was diagnosed with ADHD about a year into our relationship. And things have made more sense after that. We've agreed she'd start medication. She stopped. Let's see. Sorry.
We have agreed she'd start medication?
I know. It's weird. Sorry.
What business is it of his if she starts medication or not?
I think we're probably in agreement. I think this is going to be the details that are probably differentiate our answers here.
Probably. Yeah. Okay. But
we're already there with a bit of annoyance on my part. But go ahead, Michael. Continue.
About a month ago, I guess so. She'd been on medication for about 2 years or so. About a month ago, she stopped due to severe side effects, which she doesn't really describe. I tried to be supportive, but she's been hyper-focusing on reading, and it's starting to wear on me. She's currently working towards a publishing degree, but struggles to concentrate. Now she's trying to read 100 books before quarantine ends, and has already finished over 50. I'm proud of her, but it literally is all she does. She's neglecting basic self-care, like showering or brushing her teeth. A few days ago, I suggested she take a break and spend more time with me, which led to a heated argument about going back on her medication. She insisted she's doing fine without them, though to me, it's clear she isn't. Her parents have since texted me saying I upset her, and her friends think I need to be more understanding about her ADHD. I'm trying, but it's difficult when she's like this. Am I the asshole for pushing her to slow down and reconsider her meds?
Reconsider or demand she start them? Like the headline feels maybe a little bit clickbaity.
Yeah.
Okay. Wow, there's a lot packed in here, but let's start with our ADHD expert. What are your thoughts about ADHD meds and why people might choose to go off of them?
For me, the question, she mentioned side effects, and people can have side effects to ADHD medication, and a lot of times it's not just the medication itself, but how much people are using. I don't prescribe medication. I'm a PsyD, not an MD, but I work with people every single day when I'm seeing patients that take ADHD medication. So I think if someone's having a hard time, probably the first thing I would do is talk to your primary care provider or psychiatrist and see maybe you want to up or lower the dose and see if that helps. And then, if you kind of try different doses, maybe go to a different medication, but that's a conversation you'd have with the primary care doc. But yeah, there's issues that people have with anxiety. That can be a big one. People can feel really, really jumpy, really nervous. People can lose their appetite. People can have difficulties with sleep. There's things, and these are, most people don't have these side effects, is my understanding, but there happen to enough people that they've seen some patterns, and it could be associated with the medication. So I would talk to your primary care doc about that if you're having side effects. So I'll leave it there. I feel like there's so much more to get into.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. I kind of said my piece.
No, I want
Daniel,
to.
Gail?
I've been. Yeah, I'm itching. I'm itching to jump in here as always. No, and I mean, so first off, like if she wants to quit her meds, that's obviously that's her business.
Completely. Yep.
And at the same time, there's bigger issues here. If she's, ADHD, and Dr. Nathan, please correct me here because I do treat people with ADHD, but it's not my area of specialty. And if someone really needs, like, I just need to treat my ADHD, I tend to refer that person out. But I treat people who also happen to have ADHD as part of their presentation. But my understanding is that the symptoms of not engaging in self-care, I mean, that to me speaks to something potentially bigger than just the ADHD. And I don't know that he can force her to go back on her, or ever should force her to go back on her medication. But I do think that a loving, caring partner is going to be like, you need to get some help and look into this further if someone has stopped engaging in self-care.
Yeah, I think it's a very delicate conversation between two relationship partners to say, hey, I noticed when you were on this medicine, these kinds of things were happening routinely, and I care about you. I'm worried that they're not happening now that you're not on those medicines, right? You could approach it as a conversation about what you noticed, but you can't demand someone take a medicine, especially if she's complaining about the side effects, which can be pretty uncomfortable. I had a family member who was taking medicines, and it really upset their stomach. And like, it wasn't the appetite restriction so much as his stomach hurt. And, there was no way that you could continue to demand someone take a substance that was feeling like it was doing harm. But I agree, with Dr. Nathan, it's a conversation with the prescriber. Hey, this medicine and the side effects are not working. And it doesn't matter. I mean, ADHD, depression, anxiety, any of these medicines that you're taking, if they're causing a side effect that is impairing your functioning otherwise, you need to have that conversation with the prescribing provider to see if there are other options. And in this day and age, I mean, Dan, you and I were just having this conversation about how big the PDR is, like, versus in the 80s versus now here in 2025, we have a lot of medicine options. And, a lot of times when they're doing medication research, they're looking to decrease that side effect profile. We have a lot of options. So go back and have that conversation.
Wait,
Absolutely.
What is PDR?
Oh,
Sorry.
thank you.
For
The
the
physician's
noobs.
desk reference. It is the medication, the place where they aggregate and put all of the information about all of the medications that are available. I guess probably only in the US. I'm gonna let you noodle and make sure I'm right on that, Michael.
He will.
But
He'll figure it out.
yeah, he will. But it tells what the medicine is, what it looks like. I think it has pictures of the medicines and generic and brand name, and it's huge because we have so many options. So it's Yeah, it's a reference that your physician is using to look up all of that information because they can't possibly know every medicine and every side effect and so on and so forth.
And I would also say when it comes to ADHD, hyper-focusing is part of the profile. Having the psychologists have these things called preferred activities, things that the act of doing it, we enjoy it. The more you do it, the more you like it. I mean, we can get tired of it eventually, but it's like eating ice cream. I love ice cream. So it's like, I don't want to, was that place Cold Stone? The Cold Stone is this great ice cream place, and they have like 3 sizes. There's like it, love it, and gotta have it. If it was up to me, I'd have gotta have it all the time because the more the better. And ADHD is kind of like, there's something I like doing. Man, I want to do that all the time. So if this person's really into literature, I can say like, yeah, I totally want to read. And those non-preferred activities, the activities that we do it, but it takes energy from us. It's draining. It's not enjoyable doing chores and tasks like that. Like tons of people don't like, brushing their teeth and things like that. So if they're at home and they're just kind of like hanging out and they're not going out, things like that. And it's like, man, today, what I really want to do is I want to read some books. I can totally see that. That is ADHD right there. Like that.
Right.
I mean, once again, I don't know the situation. I'm not talking to the people, but just hearing this, I would say like, this definitely sounds like this could be just ADHD and someone might not understand that. But also I think once again, you don't tell other people to take meds. This is their, if you don't like it, you can decide how you want to have the relationship with the person. And I think this is also an issue. I work with a lot of young men. And I think there's a lot of really bad information out there for young men right now about what appropriate behavior is. It can be very, very confusing. But I could see someone thinking that it's appropriate for them to say something like this and just really innocently like thinking like this is the right thing to do and not realize like, sir, your intentions might be good, but you are really outside of what's appropriate. And you might feel very justified this might be something very clear to you that you feel very strongly about this. Doesn't matter. Like this is still something that's wildly inappropriate. Like it just, we teach kids certain things. You don't say certain things to people. You don't do certain behaviors. We try to teach kids that in elementary school and kindergarten. And as it gets older, it gets more confusing because a lot of times in movies and TV, we see people acting in really inappropriate ways. And it seems really cool. But yeah, I would absolutely say telling someone to take medication or don't take medication. It is not, unless they're specifically asking, hey, what do you think about this? And even then, I would say tread lightly because it's a very, very sensitive personal subject. And you are definitely not on safe ground unless you are their primary care provider or psychiatrist. And then someone's coming to you and you're the expert and they're coming to you specifically about this. Then, you've got a lot of space to talk about it. But if you're not that person, this is not something for you to discuss with them.
I'd like to massage the facts here, as we often do
Can,
on the show. You have a question.
I just want to underscore something that
Please.
Dr. Nathan just said, which is that right in the beginning of what you're talking about the hyper focus and preferred activities. And we need to keep in mind that part of the fact pattern before we massage it, Dan, is this was apparently during COVID, right? So we heard in the scenario that this individual wanted to read 100 books before the pandemic was over. And so clearly this person is not going out, is not socializing. So those less preferred activities, brushing teeth and showering and activities of daily living that way maybe seem also less important because who's going to know? So I just want to underscore that a minute. Dan,
the question I have, I want to just change the OP's question here a little bit because he's saying, can I force my girlfriend to take medicine or something along those lines? But here's the question that I'm actually really curious about y'all's opinions of what if we change that question to like I see my partner is having a mental health crisis or a medical crisis. And they are refusing. They're telling me they don't need to see a doctor. They don't need to go get help. How pushy should a partner get when they see their partner, not necessarily to take this medicine or that medicine, but what's the role of us as partners if we see our partner refusing to get help? So if we massage the facts a little bit, and the question is, am I the asshole for telling her she has to go see a doctor? She has to get that I really want her to go get help because I'm worried for her.
Yeah, that's a really hard
What does
thing.
that do to what does that do to your answers?
We have this couple in a 3-year-long relationship, and so clearly there's a level of commitment here. And so you're asking, how pushy do you get when there's anything on the table that they're maybe neglecting that seriously may be harming their health?
Right.
I think the line is blurry.
Yeah, I put Dr. I think Dr. Nathan, I put you on the spot here a little bit because I think this is a tougher question. We can all pretty much agree you don't tell someone you have to take this medicine or you can't take this medicine. That's just not
right. Yep.
Well, maybe
I think some younger people might not realize that, but
yeah.
I think with some seasoning experience and socialization, we understand that. But I can see how someone who's in their teens or early 20s might not fully understand that concept. For sure.
We in this room agree that would be inappropriate.
Yes. Right.
Probably most of the time, or if not almost all the time. But like, when is it okay to get like, at what is too pushy if your partner's like, yeah, I know you see a problem and your partner's not addressing it and their health is suffering or their mental health is suffering. How pushy do we get?
I think it's an excellent question. I think it's something that I wish we talked about more in our society, and maybe even like middle school or high school. And I think something that I would think about, and I would probably kind of work with clients about, say, just kind of recognize your limits. You can't control other people, period. Like, you can't do it. You might say, I'm really concerned about this, or I'm seeing these difficulties. I'm seeing, and I'm worried about you, and kind of open up the conversation. I think there's so many situations where you just dip your toe into it and just kind of like touch the topic and see where they go from there. Do they say, well, tell me more about that? Then once again, I would say, like, I would go really gently, really gently. Probably not even too, it's probably not, you could kind of like, well, I've seen some of this stuff and I'm concerned about that, and see what they say, because you are really talking about sensitive subjects here. You're talking about very sensitive subjects here. And I think there's a way to do it very, very gently, very, very gently, where you just kind of go teeny tiny step, and say, I'm worried about this, or I'm concerned about this. And you kind of create some space for them to say something. But I think jumping from, you need, like I'm having this thought that, I know what the solution is, and here's what you need to do. Like, that is such a gigantic jump to take. I'd be concerned about that. I think there is a space to tell someone that we care about, I'm worried about this, and then see what they say. And if they don't want to talk about it, then the conversation's over.
And I would say, in addition to that, like, I like that as a starting place, but I think there's a direct relationship to the level of impairment or harm to that individual and the level of pushiness. But there's also a third dimension to that, which is, how much am I responsible for that outcome? So, in a relationship where someone is clearly in imminent danger to themselves, yes, right, intervene, but it's not anything more than maybe a safety check, and you hand it over to someone else, and you create that opportunity for that person to be safe, but you are not taking charge and being responsible for that, right? No. Because that is likely way beyond your skill set, especially if you're involved with that person. Like, it's not your job. But if you have a reason to believe that that person is in danger, you want to deliver that what's the word I'm looking for? That help, I guess, really, really quickly. And you probably need to be really pushy about it. Similarly, if, someone was actively having a heart attack, right, yes, you call in medical resources. That's what you do, because, that's the right thing to do, and you intervene. And I can't really think of an instance where you wouldn't want to do that. But, when you have a partner who's neglecting hygiene, not brushing teeth, kind of maybe doesn't smell really great, does that present an imminent risk to them? Probably not. That ground gets squishier. Dan, you have any thoughts?
No. I think what I want to do with this one is change the fact pattern and then answer the
new fact pattern.
The new fact pattern, yeah. Because I think that there are times, and you all probably, I'm sure, have had this experience as well. Like, I do all my work with adults, and I really like to have their partner come in for a visit fairly early on, if that's workable and the partner's amenable and the client is amenable, because I find that sometimes the data I'm getting from their partner is more accurate, because we have trouble seeing for ourselves, and the partner, that partnered information is really important. Not all the time, but often enough. And sometimes I just do okay, would you check in with your partner? What do they want you? What does she want you to be? I work mostly with men or a couple. So what does she want you to be working on here? Not because I want to do the partner's bidding necessarily, but because it gives me greater insight into what other people are seeing. And I try to do that with a person in the room if I can. And here's the situation where he may be having a greater degree of insight into her level of impairment. And if he's just pushing her to get help, I may be okay with that. I'm not okay with her telling him her she has to take her medicine. But I'm probably okay with him being fairly pushy about going and getting help, because something's like that the hygiene thing is usually where the line is crossed. Assuming OP is telling us accurate information, which we always worry about.
Yeah, but again, to Dr. Nathan's point, you broach that conversation from a loving and caring space.
Yeah.
Hey, honey, I'm really worried about you. This is really different than what I've experienced with, in you for the last 3 years. And I'm wondering if you're open to hearing kind of my concerns here. And you start to tread gently and lightly and then open that conversation up.
And
nobody wants to be told they smell bad.
For sure, right. And I think and it's one thing I've been thinking about is like, oh, I gotta say this. When I was 20 years old, when I was 23 years old, man, I was a very, very, very different person. Someone said, if you had one wish, like one reasonable wish, that has involves time travel, what would it be? And I said, I'd like to go back to my late teens, early 20s and tell myself a couple things, So that is very real. I'm not trying to be like, wow, I know so much more than this person. Like you learn these things through experience, you learn these things through mistakes,
Absolutely.
and I have made a ton. And that's where this is coming from, not from, I'm so smart. Hopefully this is helpful to someone, but learn from other people who've been through it, and these are things that they learned through suffering and difficulty, that this is a better way to do it. For ADHD, especially for someone who's 20, I'm not sure hygiene is that big of a deal. Like the number of people that I talk to, like, I hate brushing my teeth. And I hear that all the time. I hear that I hate taking a shower. And I guess part of me is like, okay, I hear, have you had a cavity? And a lot of people are like, no, I haven't had a cavity. It's like, wait till you have a cavity. I had a cavity when I was in college. And it's like, having a cavity is way worse than brushing your teeth. I know that from experience. So yeah, it is a hassle brushing your teeth. I'd much rather be doing a lot of other things than brushing my teeth. But if you have a cavity, you will never question brushing your teeth again. I just promise you. So you can take my word for it, or you can have the experience. And some people are more likely to get cavities, and some people are less likely to get cavities, and blah, 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 blah. But this is a kind of an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure kind of things. But I could, a lot of people with ADHD, there's just one of the ways I talk about the mind with a lot of folks with ADHD is it's like a cell phone battery. And when we do things we enjoy, it kind of recharges that cell phone battery. When we do things we don't like, it kind of uses it up. And when we're low, we feel crummy. And a lot of times with people with ADHD, they go through that battery a lot faster. That charge gets used up a lot faster than for typical people. So I find a lot of people with ADHD, they really try and minimize the stuff they don't like doing. And it's like, what are the things I have to do? Like, oh, I'm in school, I got to write that paper, I got to do this big project. That's going to take a lot of energy. A lot of these other things that are kind of like day-to-day things, I'm just not going to do that right now because I just don't have the energy for doing it, because I've been doing all this other stuff, etc. So once again, because of the ADHD context, I think a lot of times if it's not ADHD, like, they're not doing hygiene, that's kind of a red flag. But for me, it's like, well, it might be a red flag or it might not. I would want to dig in there a little bit.
Okay. I will yield to your greater knowledge and experience. I when I'm working with folks with ADHD, it's always something, and they're not coming in like primarily for
depression and ADHD.
I'm seeing depression and or anxiety or some other problem, grief. And so I really am keying on that thing. And it sounds like what you're saying, David, is that you're not going to key on that quite. You're going to pay attention to it, but it's not going to. It's like I'm hitting the fire alarm on this, and you're like, let's keep looking at it.
Well, part of it's also the age. For like a 20-something. Like I remember when I was in college, like I went to a small liberal school, and I was the only person on campus maybe that made my bed every morning. I go studying other people. Yeah, I love making my bed, because at night, I just like, I like getting, look at this. Like, I like getting into a bed that's made. It just feels so much more relaxing for me than opposed to like yanking like a sheet that's just kind of like, I don't know. It's just like an aesthetic thing or something. It just feels much more like calming and relaxing. It's just no one else I knew on campus did that. And people thought it was bonkers. So
Yeah.
I mean, I think there's different things that people like. So I think at 20 something, like their room's not clean. If they're 16 years old, their room's not clean. That's a very different thing than if someone's 40 years old and they're not taking a shower.
Okay, you know
Over
what?
50 years. So I think, like, once again, that the hygiene thing depends on the context. So for 20 something, especially during COVID, I just like maybe, but not. If it was
Yeah.
if it was somebody who's got like a professional job, then it's and you've got to go out and stuff like that. Like, yeah, then I think it's more appropriate. To me, it's a bigger issue that they're not taking, like, kind of falls that not taking care of themselves, because then those not taking care of themselves is kind of an indicator that things are awry. But in that, someone's 20 years old, it's COVID, it's ADHD. I would want to dig into it more to figure out, is this not taking care of themselves, or is this kind of, I'm using all my energy to read all my books?
Yeah, I think about, like, you've just pointed something out to me that I'm just going to be really annoyed about, which is that at age 60, I've clearly forgotten a little bit about what it's like to be 20, and I'd like to think that I
I work
remember
with
that,
so many 20-year-olds. It's very easy for me to have
but
that top of mind.
as you're describing making your bed in college, maybe I shouldn't admit this publicly, but I do remember as a college student, life is very different now. As a college student, like, the sheets would go home at the end of the semester and then they'd get washed. And I'm mortified by this today. Like, 60-year-old me is horrified by this behavior. But I'm fairly certain that at no point during the semester did the sheets leave the bed. Like,
Would they?
that's gross, like
Right.
awful.
Okay, I'm just
And
grossed out by both of you guys. Okay, all right, but you know what? I know I'm the odd one out here. I know
Oh
I'm the
no. Oh
so
no.
many
I'm
comments.
totally
People
with
made
you,
so
David.
many comments to me when I was in college about, like, what are you doing? And I'm just like, yeah.
I
It
mean,
became a
No,
joke
I'm
for a
on
lot
your
of
side,
people.
David, but I'm a
Okay, all
girl.
right.
So my
Okay, all
experience
right.
of that
Well,
time
I
period
thought you were
of
saying,
life
like,
is
oh yeah,
way
I
different
never
than.
watched it. Men, it didn't matter. It did not matter. Like, I was
no.
the only person that I knew
Oh.
who, people would walk in, they're like, people would make comments like, "Did your mom come visit you?" Like all these. No, like, no, but yeah, no, lots of comments about that.
Oh
So
goodness.
I know, but for me, it felt very, 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 it felt very satisfying. It was very, very fulfilling to me
Oh,
All
to
right.
I'm
spend,
I'm
a
totally
minute
with
or
you.
two
I'm on
making the
team make
bed.
the
But
bed. That feels
yeah, okay,
awesome.
yeah.
So
David,
we need to
I
render
think.
some. Yeah, go
Oh,
ahead.
no, I want to go back to something. So, David, I think you and I sat down for coffee one day. I think
Yeah.
you were the person who shared the resource, How to ADHD.
Yes.
Yes,
Oh
I
man,
love her, by the way.
she
Thank you.
is
Jessica
fantastic.
McCabe,
Yeah.
we're gonna link her
Yes.
here
She is so
because
great. Yeah.
she said something that like really helped click, which is now versus not now, and ADHD, this idea, I'm pretty sure it was her.
Yes. 100%.
And I think this person in this particular quandary that we've been talking about is maybe really struggling about now versus not now, right? And these books are very much now, and I'm in it, and showering and brushing my teeth. These are things I don't need to do right now. They're not now. I don't need to be clean now. And so I think that's also often a struggle for individuals across the lifespan with ADHD. But I was recently reminded, as I was talking to one of my children who has ADHD, and they lovingly said to me, I think I'm struggling with now versus not now. And I was like, oh my gosh, this makes so much sense. Here's how we do this. Yep, we're all on board. Like, just identifying that's where I'm stuck now versus not now was just eye-opening for all involved in the conversation. So those of you who have ADHD out there and you're struggling to do a thing, ask yourself, is it really just the problem of it's just not now?
And one more thing I'll add,
Yeah.
a lot of people that I talk to have ADHD, there's a whole issue with, like, I can brush my teeth, but I have to brush my teeth again. Like, I'm not actually, like, moving the ball forward. It's like, you have to, and when we talk about changing that, it's just like, oh, this is so tedious. It's like, I get it. So, like, I think there's certain tasks that
Right.
it's like, it's not like getting my paper done. Like, once I get my paper done, or once I get this thing done, it's done. I never have to do it again. It's like, so I think
We'll be
there's
there
certain
again
tasks that are
tonight.
just even more irritating and more frustrating for people with
Mm.
ADHD. And that's just going to, again, like, and okay, what are the strategies that we still have good hygiene, and do that? But, like, there's certain tasks that are just going to be less fulfilling to people with ADHD and just a little bit more harder. So I think that's the thing too.
And I want to just really take a moment to remind people that we exist on a spectrum. There's a real temptation out there to label and diagnose and self-diagnose and, go to Dr. TikTok and all of this. And the reality is you don't have to have a diagnosis to struggle or benefit from some of these
100%.
strategies.
Yep.
It isn't a switch. It isn't an on or off thing. So if you're hearing something today and you think, gosh, that's really me, maybe I have ADHD. Or maybe you exist on a spectrum and this is a strategy that really works for you. So just keep that in
I just
mind.
want to point out real briefly here for those of you not watching this on YouTube that when Dr. MacBride mentioned Dr. TikTok, Dr. Nathan provided an eye roll that would make a teenager proud. Like, I
It's
was
so
super
bad.
impressed.
It's so bad.
I was super impressed by that. No,
TikTok
there's so
has
much, there's
created
so
a
much.
lot of discussions that I've had. There's so much garbage on TikTok. It's unbelievable.
Yeah.
This would be the time for Gayle and I to plug the fact that we're both on TikTok. I'm at Dr. Dan Kessler, and
Not
he's
those guys. Not you
at
two.
Dr. G McBride. We're going to assume that the two of us are providing only quality information, and in reality, we don't know we don't know necessarily the credentials of people on TikTok, and some are being just there's
For the
scads of
clicks, for the
misinformation.
I'm
engagement.
not
Yeah.
against TikTok for finding information and developing community. What I am against is using that as an opportunity to go into your doctor's office and say, I know I have this thing. I saw it on
Right.
TikTok. Like,
We're seeing a lot of that.
no, or identifying and labeling yourself because you've seen it in a non-credible environment, right? This may be a starting place for your research. It helps people ask sometimes really good questions, but it's not an ending place. It's not a place where you then self-diagnose or, insist to your doctor that you have this disorder because.
Yeah.
True story. This came up recently, and I had a client, college educated, 20s, who came to me because they had ADHD and they're trying to learn some ADHD skills. I will also say, kind of speaking of the spectrum, there's so many things I do to organize my day that have everything to do with like, oh, that's a really good idea because I learned about in a training or a book or something like that related to ADHD. So I mean, these things help everybody.
Mhm.
There's all kinds of really useful skills that people can learn and that I benefit from. But I do go back to this person came in 20s, and suddenly like they were just having a really hard time. This is like a third or fourth time I saw them. And I said, and they're on medication. Do you want to talk to your doctor about your medication? Because maybe that's not going so well for you. It sounds like things have really taken a turn in the past week or two. And this person said, "Oh, I'm not taking ADHD medication anymore." I'm like, "Oh, okay. Like, what caused that to happen?" He's like, "Well, none of us are." And I'm like, "Okay." He's like, "Because it's all over. It's all over TikTok. If you take ADHD medication, you get autism."
Mm.
And I mean, this is a college educated person. And so I guess part of it is people go to TikTok and people want to know what's going on. But my concern and my real deep frustration, and it's not just on TikTok, there are other people who do it in other places too. People kind of present themselves as experts and they're doing it for clicks, they're doing it for engagement, they're doing it for money, they're doing it to kind of build up their own benefit. And they're saying stuff that's profoundly untrue and just unhelpful. I think people already have enough difficulties in their lives without someone kind of taking advantage of a platform to give misinformation to people, for their own kind of personal betterment. I think it's a pretty scummy thing to do. So if you don't know what you're talking about if you don't know what you're talking about, just, I don't know, please leave it alone.
Yeah, I think unfortunately, and we could do a whole episode on this but unfortunately we're not necessarily looking at, is this a credible source of information?
100%.
And all of the information we're getting so information from so many sources. And at each source, we should be asking ourselves, like, what is the credibility behind this source? How much has been vetted? And what we're seeing a lot of is people viewing all sources as having equal quality, regardless of whether it's a double-blind, peer-reviewed research literature article, or some guy who had this problem on TikTok or other social media platforms, and that's really problematic. Well, we should. There's more on that probably.
Yes.
Yeah. Getting back to the topic here, though, is he the asshole for making her for telling her she has to take her ADHD meds? That was his question.
I guess I would want to hear that actual conversation, right? Did he say you have to, or did he really, is that conversation more loving than maybe he even presented? Like maybe he feels this way, but maybe said like, hey, you really look like you're not doing well. I think you did better on ADHD medications. I think that's different than you're not lifing, you're not adulting here. You need to take this medicine, which is maybe more demanding than I would like to see this young person be in a relationship. So I think I would go with a soft, I have some real concerns about how he's likely communicating his probably good intent, and it's being executed poorly. I don't know that I have enough to say asshole or even sucks. I suspect it's somewhere in a problematic territory, though. David?
There's part of me, I love that answer. I feel it's such a loving, compassionate, empathetic psychologist answer. And I think in this world of like hot takes and you know, owning people online and all that, I think I really like that. And I think that's the healthy answer. You know,
Yeah.
because I think just saying like this person is the asshole is it's not. It's like really viscerally satisfying, right? To smash someone and being sanctimonious. It's really enjoyable to do that. But I think we just need less of that right now. We need to tone it down. And I think your point about probably means well. I'd like, you know, I don't know, but I think it's entirely possible this person means well. Maybe they grew up in a home where like doing this hygiene stuff was really important. You know, and they're, you know, they're 22. Was it 22 or 23? They're 22 and they've been in a relationship for 3 years. You know, that's so young. That's so young.
Yeah.
And they're still learning how the world works, and this is what was been role modeled to them by adults, and they're thinking this is the appropriate thing for adults. And I mean, I don't know. This is pure speculation, but I think there's a lot of ways that this really could be meant as a loving thing. And I think, especially with guys, so often, I think there's so many times that guys do something, and it's coming from what they think is a loving, supportive way, and they get slammed so hard, and they're just in shock, and I think it does so much damage to guys. And women too. You know, I work with a lot of guys who have these experiences, so I hear about it all the time. So yeah, I really like that answer, and I really want to kind of elevate that answer. I really like that. We don't know. We don't know. And saying the person's an asshole, I think is too easy and too harmful, and I want to avoid that.
I really like that point. I think that without being in the room and hearing the context of it, the clickbaity way the question was worded, yeah, probably I would think like you crossed a line.
Yeah.
But we don't know what was said and what was there, and it sounds like we're willing to give him a little bit of like what actually happened before we determine that and we don't know and we won't know what actually happened unless Michael has greater insight for us. I do want to underscore, I'm going to go way back to the beginning of this before you just throw this to Michael. You said something, David, I thought was really interesting. We've talked about this, like, I can't necessarily tell you what you need to do, but I can tell you what I'm okay with being in a relationship.
Right.
So I can't tell my partner, you're not allowed to smoke. You can't smoke cigarettes. But I can tell a partner, I don't want to be in a relationship with someone who smokes. Like, that's okay for me to make that determination for myself that I don't want to be in a loving, caring relationship with a smoker. Discrimination, whatever, not. That's a choice for me. But I can't tell you not to smoke, and that's a fine.
Right.
And I like what you kind of alluded to that earlier on. Like, you can't tell her she has to do this, but he can say like, this is not a relationship I want to be a part of. And that they're talking, but now you're talking about self rather than talking about what the other person needs to do.
Yeah.
So,
and
Michael,
I jumped in before both of you because I also was a little bit concerned as the men in this conversation. There is a hesitancy to tell the woman in this scenario what to do. And so I wanted to get in there as the woman and be able to say, like, I think there is a kind and loving place for this. And I think we have an awareness that men sometimes can overstep and be really pushy and come off badly, even though they have loving intent. So I sort of intentionally kind of inserted my opinion a little bit quicker because I wanted to not just get on this, like, but men can't tell women what to do. That's true. And women can't tell men what to do with their bodies, I should say. I'm going to be really clear on what substances you take or what you do and those kinds of things. And I wanted to remind us in this conversation that, you know, this is a relationship, and kind of like what you were saying, Dan, it is okay to say, hey, I'm concerned and I can't be in a relationship with someone whose ADHD is not in better control, or they are hyper focused on reading and neglecting hygiene and those kinds of things. Like, you can say that. And I think that is a fair thing without demanding somebody do something different with their body. But you do have a decision point in here. So anyway. Michael.
Well, you guys have such wonderful answers, and you know the internet is not nearly as kind in their responses.
What? Really?
And I mean, sometimes they get nuanced responses, but what surprised me about this one, and really one of the reasons that I selected it, was the responses were not what I expected. I mean, there were most of the responses actually were, "You're not the asshole," which kind of surprised me because it felt like a pushy, demanding kind of stance. And what was surprising, though, is most of those people who weighed in saying, "You're not the asshole," were people with ADHD who said, "If that were me, I would want to know that. Like, you need to tell me that shit's going off the rails because I don't have a good double check otherwise." And then the people who said, "You're the asshole," looked at the wording, where he said, like, "We agreed." They're like, yeah, this is already a problem. And we haven't even really got to like the meat of your conversation, which Dan, you jumped in right away, and David as well. Both of you were like, whoa, wait, this doesn't sound great. Like, why is this guy part of this conversation, this decision or whatever? And so the "you're the asshole" people really weighed in on that in the language and just kind of the controlling nature potentially. And you're right. We don't know what that conversation actually looked like. Unfortunately, the OP didn't really come back and give us, an objective perspective of what exactly he said. We just have the post, and that was really it. No clarification later on. The one kind of interesting side conversation, which I was really glad to hear you guys bring up, which was essentially, how hard do you push somebody? And, how hard do you make that concern known? And as the internet does, it often goes down unexpected little pathways. And a bunch of people jumped in talking about being members of the sandwich generation, and having children and elderly parents who have dementia and don't want to take their medication or whatever. And that's not the conversation that this post was about at all. But that idea of, where does that loving, supportive person stand in relationship to medication and medical concerns? So I don't know if you have anything else to say about any of those, but those were kind of the main things.
It's interesting to hear that answer about, people with ADHD saying, "Step in." If it was just other people just saying, "Yeah, totally, it's appropriate if you do that," like that, I kind of winced. I'm like, "Oh my gosh, really?" But yeah, I think that again, context makes a lot of difference, and I think that makes a lot. And I think if you have that relationship, with someone and say like, "Hey, can you give me a heads up if things are kind of, getting flaky?" I think that totally makes sense. I think there's also another issue in our culture with men, and men are really struggling with this. I mean, society in general is, but I think the men in particular, where it's like, you're the one who, it's like, if you're a real man, the stuff that you want, that happens, and then you make it happen. And if you can't make it happen, if people aren't doing what you say, you're a wuss, and a bunch of other, derogatory things. And I think there's tremendous pressure for guys to kind of prove that their man card is up to date. And it has expired. They haven't lost their man privileges. And I feel like this is it's one of these kind of issues that we have with gender and expectations and people, and that's rough. So I mean, I think that's a whole other dimension to if there's something going on wrong and I notice that it's bothering me, what's the best way to deal with it? And I think there's some really unhealthy ideas out there for young men about this is how you're supposed to deal with something that's bothering you. And I think that can make the problems worse if you follow a lot of the advice that's out there. So I appreciate the person's asking about it. I think, I'm glad that someone's asking. I'm really glad that someone's asking. They're putting themselves out there.
Yeah.
So that's a good thing.
Yeah. Well, thank you, all three of you. Thanks, all three of you. Thanks, all three of you. I'll go with that. For another riveting debate and a glimpse into the collective conscience of the internet forums. Remember, morality is often shades of gray and not just black or white.
Oh,
thanks very much.
Shit, that's me. Sorry, guys. I was just like really enjoying just thinking about that conversation that we had, and got kind of lost in my own head because that was really helpful, and I really appreciate your unique perspectives. Thanks for being on with us.
Thank you so much.
Thanks for having me.
Really happy to have you here, and I learned one or two things today as well, and I appreciate that. Not too old to learn and be reminded of a few things. So thank you so much for joining us.
Absolutely. It was a great conversation. Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah. Please follow and share Veritas Views on the podcast platforms with your neighbors and friends. And as always, stick around through the credits for the bonus conversation about, I don't know, whatever happens beyond their mind today.
You can follow Dr. Dan Kessler at Dr. Dan Kessler and Dr. Gayle MacBride at Dr. G. MacBride. Oh, and you can find them both at veritaspp.com. Credits. Tickling the Ivories, Matthew Reddington. Art, production, and design, bringing this show together with flair and finesse, Michelle Love. Recording and editing, turning chaos into something worth sharing, Michael MacBride. Intro, outro, I'm Kelly Buttrick, a VO talent who just happens to be Dr. MacBride's cousin. Cats, CJ, Linus, Sadie, and Griffin. Hosting by whomever lost the coin flip. Interruptions by all their children. The content of this podcast is for informational and educational purposes only and is not a substitute for professional mental health advice, diagnosis, or treatment. Listening to this podcast does not constitute a therapist-client relationship. If you believe you may be experiencing a mental health issue, please seek the assistance of a qualified mental health professional. If you are experiencing a mental health crisis, you can call or text 988 from anywhere in the U.S. to be connected to Crisis Mental Health Services.
Thanks for listening. As promised, here's the bonus conversation.
We've been fortunate to have Dr. David Nathan with us today, and we love to have these bonus conversations. We started our season 1 a lot of times with something quirky in each other's office and that would tell maybe an interesting story. David, I'm curious, is there something in your office that tells an interesting story about you or, gives you a memory that you'd like to share with us? I'm going to let you pick the object.
Okay, well, I feel really lucky. I have this medallion here. It's from Japan.
Oh.
And it is actually from a temple in Kyoto. I had the opportunity when I was 22 years old to go to Japan for 2 weeks. And this is a couple of years after the movie The Matrix came out. And there's a sequence in The Matrix where Neo asks Morpheus if the Oracle knows everything. And Morpheus kind of smiles to himself and says, she would say that she knows enough. And I was like, that's an interesting quote. And this little kind of amulet. This is from a fountain in Kyoto. And in Japanese, it says a person who is wise knows that they know enough. So there's kind of this, where does that come from? And I always kind of thought that's an interesting, I don't know that reference. I never Googled it, but it comes from this particular this particular temple and this particular fountain, this kind of particular idea. And I always there's so much information out there, and I think there's a lot just to having self-confidence and people, things have been difficult. I think if there's one aspect of a silver line to COVID as we got through it, if you're here right now, we got through COVID. There's going to be difficult things that happen in the future. There's difficult things going on right now. We've been through difficult things. We can get through this too, and kind of having faith that, we don't know exactly what's going to happen, but we will make decisions and we'll make the best decisions that we can given what we know and what we expect. And I think the best thing we can do is just put one foot in front of the other and have faith in ourselves and keep going. And, knowing that we know enough, we might wish that we knew more, but, just have faith that you know enough and keep on going. I think it's a real healing, helpful way of being in the world. So this is something that I have, and when I'm here working from home, it's always right next to my computer.
Awesome. Well, thank you very much.
Excellent.
That's a really cool story.
You bet.
Thanks for sharing.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Thanks everyone for tuning in. Tune in again next week for a whole other Am I the Asshole debate.
We love hearing from you, so please review us on Apple, Spotify, or, wherever you're listening. If you enjoyed this podcast, please review, like, and follow. Also, give it a share. This helps us reach more listeners.